us and who are entering in this conversation are thinking about these things for the very first time ever. If this is your first time delving into talking about gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, great, you are in the right place. This, what we're going to talk about today, in this segment is just for you, and we're just going to, it's sort of a, like I said, a beginner's guide to understanding some of these. I don't want you to worry. There's not like a party happening right outside, but they're testing the fire alarms. So that's why we're going to get some blinking lights back there. But we're going to keep doing the work of the Lord no matter what happens out there, right? Amen, amen. So the resource that we're going to be using today comes from us from Reconciling Works, Lutherans for Full Participation, which since 1974 has been advocating for the full welcome, full inclusion, full equity of LGBTQIA Lutherans in all aspects of the life in the church, congregations, and their community. And they have a wonderful program, Reconciling in Christ, for congregations who want to work at being particularly welcoming to LGBTQI community. And they have a number of great resources on their website, Reconciling Works. But the one that we're going to be using today is called Lutheran Introduction to Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Gender Expression. In it, it has so much wonderful information and easy to digest, so that I would recommend going to their website and getting this for your congregation if you or for yourself if you want to delve deeper than what we're going to do today. But this is sort of what we're going to be using, and we thank them for this resource. Before we get started, there are a couple things that I just want to highlight. And the first is, if you take anything away from our talk this morning, I want to say, this is what I want you to take away. People over definitions. That I can't repeat that enough. People over definitions. I know we want to know which term or identity or pronouns or titles to use, and it's good because we want to honor people and their experiences. But don't get stuck on those things. Those aren't like boxes where we categorize people, very neatly into any of these things. You want to orient yourself around the person, right? And the person is what you're welcoming. And to welcome somebody, all you really need to know is their name, right? So we're always orienting ourselves, talk about the person, right? But what brought you here today, and what, as human beings, we're curious, right? We're curious creatures. But there's a continuum of curiosity, right? And so when you're engaging in being curious, especially about LGBTQIA people, queer folk, I want you to try to stay on what I call the hospitable end of curiosity, or what they call the hospitable end of curiosity, right? Ask yourself, why am I asking this question? Why am I going to ask this? Will this question help build a relationship of mutual trust and respect? That is the most important thing that we're trying to do, right? Build relationship with trust, mutual trust and respect. We want to respect the other person. What we want to avoid is being on the opposite end of the curiosity spectrum, which is more lurid curiosity, right? We don't want to ask people details about their bodies, for example. That is not at all hospitable, right? And our goal is to dismantle barriers between people, and the perception that queer people are sort of exotic oddities to be lured at doesn't help that. That doesn't make me feel welcome. That doesn't make anybody feel welcome, right? So we want to really stay on this hospitable side of our curiosity when engaging. And the last thing I want to say is self-care, right? We're going to talk about a lot of spectrums and continuums, and I hope that most of us are able to identify and find ourselves within those. But if you don't, that's okay. Just because the community or we haven't, come up with the word or the term that describes your lived experience, we keep working on it and we figure it out. But you don't have to force yourself into a term that doesn't fit right for you, and you really need to practice that self-care when engaged in this work. So so let's get into it. The spectrums. spectrums of sexual orientation, spectrums of gender identity, spectrums of gender expression. So now we're going to be doing this a lot, uncoupling. Sexual orientation and gender identity and gender expression are two separate things. They sort of interrelate, but they're really identifiers that are separate. So let's start with the gender and that stuff. It's interesting when somebody gives birth, right? The doctor always asks this question of, is it a boy or is it a girl? And it's kind of interesting because, first of all, I think that's something we need to work on, right? We don't give it personhood. It is it, right? Until it's given a gender, is it like this not person? But then most states only have two boxes that you can check, male and female, when it comes to the idea of sex. And I'm going to share my screen so you can look along with me. I think it'll make it easier. Here we go. Okay, you're looking at my screen, right? Awesome. So then sex, right, is what's assigned at birth based on external genitalia, reproductive organs, chromosomes, hormones, right? And usually what most of us have an idea, what we say is male, or what the options are, male or female. But we know that that's not the only options. There are people with ambiguous genitalia or other biological complexities that may, right? And here we go, people over definitions, who may identify as intersex. And that is sort of that in-between space. And we respect that, and we, fight for the opportunity for people to identify in this way as well. Next is our gender identity, right? Now, gender identity refers to a person's sort of innate, deeply felt psychological identification as man or woman or another gender, and it can and doesn't have to necessarily correspond to the sex assigned at birth. You got me? My gender identity does not necessarily have to line up with the sex that I was assigned at birth. Here we're uncoupling those two things, right? And so some people have a gender identity of man, some people have a gender identity of woman, and then there's in this continuum, there's this in between, right? And there's this a sort of an umbrella term. We're in this gender queer, and it's a term used for people who do not sort of identify within that gender binary. We're going to use that word a lot, the binary of male, female, man, woman, who maybe identify as neither, or identify as both, or identify as some part of one or the other, or at different times feel different things when it comes to their gender identity. But this is how we sort of pull these apart and create the spectrum, creating space for people. And we use some of these umbrella terms to describe us, people who, a term that may help people describe themselves who may not feel this binary or one of the ends suits them. The last sort of piece in this puzzle is gender expression. Now, gender expression refers to the external characteristics and behaviors that are socially defined as either masculine or feminine, right? And these are constructed, social constructed. We're talking about clothing, dress. We're talking about how we groom. We're talking about speech patterns and mannerisms and how we socially interact with each other. And these, again, we have on one end, the binary masculine, and on the other end, we have feminine. And then in the middle, we sort of have androgynous, or here you might hear gender nonconforming. So if you're, we'll get into that term a little later again, but if your sex and your gender identity sort of match up, but your gender expression is not what society would say is how it should be, or what they traditionally say it should be, you might say that you're gender nonconforming. Now, so one of the first things that I want us to realize is in these three pieces as they come together, that they don't have to all line up. You got me? So that means it doesn't have to be I was assigned female at birth. I identify as a woman, and my expression of my gender is feminine. Like that sort of down the line. For some, yes. For many, not so much. It doesn't all line up perfectly that way. So let's use me, for example, as an example. Born, gender assigned at birth, male, right? That's what my gender identity. I use pronouns he, him, his. I identify as a man. So there you go. Gender expression. That's where I get a little interesting, because what are masculine things and what are feminine things? And let me tell you, I enjoy like breaking down those barriers. And it's not that I identify in one part of this. I'm like, oh, here I am on this spectrum. But I like to be, I want to express myself as a creative person, as an artist, in a variety of ways. So usually, for example, on a Saturday morning, you can catch me on Randall's Island playing rugby. Right now with Gotham Knights Rugby Club, I love my team. Right now, putting on my rugby boots, my jersey, my short, getting ready to literally hit people with my body, and I enjoy that so much. But this super masculine behavior, right? And that's part of who I am and part of my person. While at the same time, let me tell you that the clothes I wear sometimes, and it's just between you and us here on the internet, right? I purchase sometimes clothes from the women's section at the store. What can I tell you? Plus size women is much more interesting than plus size men. It's working on it. I got this shirt right here. I love it. Look at this print. Plus size men. We're working on that. We're breaking down those barriers of what it means to be men's clothes and women's clothes. But I do. And so my gender expression is creative. And these things, like I said, it's about people over definitions. So you don't need to feel stuck in a place as you journey and as other people journey in their life. Let me share my screen again. So then moving on to sexual orientation. So sexual orientation is the term used to describe what gender or genders someone is physically and emotionally attracted to, right? And on this spectrum, we have people who are attracted to men, people who are attracted to women, and everything in between. And here, these are probably the terms that we are most familiar with, right? So if you are a woman and you female woman and you are attracted to men, we say, oh, she's heterosexual. If you are a man who's attracted to men, we say, oh, he's gay. If you are a woman who's attracted to women, you say, oh, she's a lesbian. If you are a man who's attracted to women, or you say, oh, heterosexual. And those are sort of the terms that most of us, I'm sure, those LGB or LG, we are the ones that we come with a general understanding about those. Now, again, in the middle, we have umbrella terms for people who love beyond that paradigm, that binary of gender. And words that we use or can use are like bisexual, pansexual, queer, to describe these other sexual orientations that aren't just limited to one gender and are not limited to the binary of gender that usually exists. So again, they remind us here, and I love it, our lives are more complex than checkboxes. These continua are an important reminder of putting people over definitions and practicing our Lutheran tradition of practicing hospitality and welcoming our neighbors. So let's dig into some of these umbrella terms that we saw. So bisexuality, not straight, not gay, in that middle part. Bisexual is an identity term people use when they're physically or emotionally attracted to all sort of gender identities. Some people prefer the term pansexual. in that respect, meaning that they love and are attracted regardless of genders, or of all genders expressions. And because bisexual, as you can imagine, has that connotation of that binary, of that male, female, man, woman binary. And so for some people that doesn't really describe their experience. For some that does describe their experience. So we have that word too. One of the things that we have to remember as we talk about, you're going to be tired of me here saying it, people over definitions. It doesn't matter the relationships that people are in their identifying their sexual orientation. Does that make sense? It doesn't matter, it's not contingent upon you being in a relationship, how you identify. So especially for my pan and bi siblings, many times you find that they are being told by heterosexual people that they're gay. Oh, you're just gay and you don't know it, or you're figuring it out. Or they're even gay or lesbian people telling bi and pansexual people, oh, you're just straight, or you're confused. You need to pick one or the other. You have to pick this binary of gay or straight, and it's not true, right? It is completely not true. Their identity is as valid and authentic and should be honored and supported as much as the heterosexual, gay, lesbian identifiers. And we all actually have to do that work in the community to uplift these relationships and to just stop it. Really, let's just stop doing that. Let people identify people over definitions. Going back to sort of gender, these are in that middle area. We talked about, transgender, gender nonconforming. So this is saying that people are not cisgendered, right? Cisgendered, so for example, I'm cisgender, right? Cisgender means the sex that was assigned to me at my birth is the gender which I identify, and that's cisgender. So if that doesn't match up, like that coupling isn't, there are terms to explain. And so for a lot, a transgender identity is where it's helpful, right? So let's say somebody might have, who identifies and lives their full life as a woman, but whose their sex assigned at birth was male. That person may identify as transgender. Other transgender people identify somewhere in between. It's not just male, man, and woman, or neither. And some people, it's not one gender doesn't define them the whole time. They might be sort of gender fluid. But this idea of trans is an umbrella term. We talked about gender nonconforming, which is when somebody whose gender identity and the sex that were assigned at birth sort of line up, but their gender expression sort of goes against the cultural and societal expectations, and that's important too. The idea of gender queer, again, can describe a person who doesn't subscribe to the conventional gender distinctions, right? That people non-binary, or who do not find this male-female setup to be their experience or how they identify, and so they've new words and new terms to figure out how to say that. When again here they remind us, when somebody shares their identity with you, when somebody shares something so intimate about who they are as a person with you, please affirm that. Please understand, and please be respectful. Please use the pronouns that they ask you to use. Please refer to them to the name that they want you to use. That is, again, above understanding all of these terms, the most important thing to do. Now, there's a word that I've been using all day. It's part of the name, the title of this whole series, that might cause pause for some of us in both the LGBT community and outside the LGBT community, and this word queer. And I'm not using queer as a slur, but as someone's sort of identity. The term has been used for a long time in a very negative way, and we recognize that. But sort of in the late 80s, that term, that label queer, began to be reclaimed by LGBTQIA people as a positive self-identifier. It has been reclaimed as an adjective to describe something in the LGBT community that sort of disrupts the societal norms. So you'll hear about queer bodies, queer identities, queer art, queer theology, and that sort of, that word is sort of gaining traction, and it's an umbrella term. Right? It's another one of these umbrella terms to bring together individuals whose sexual orientation or gender identity. So this is a term that sort of encompasses both. I've been saying, gender identity things are over here and sexual orientation things are sort of separate, they are, but this word queer sort of encapsulates and provides community for people who aren't cisgendered, for people who aren't heterosexual, who don't identify in those ways, can find community, a wider community in these terms. I should, and I want to honor, because again, like I said, people over terms. For some people, this term is in the community doesn't work for them. There's a history, the pain, for whatever reason, and we respect that, right? We don't force this term on anybody, even in the community, and we understand that for some, that just doesn't work. So for my allies out there, I wouldn't necessarily start using this word or throwing this word around. This is one where I would, with a curiosity of hospitality, be checking in with the community when using it, so to make sure that we're not causing pain or harm instead of being hospitable. The last thing, sort of towards the end of this now, that I want to talk about is personal pronouns. And this is a very easy way where we can all show respect and dignity for people, no matter how they identify. And personal pronouns are a set of pronouns a person wants others to use when talking about them. Understanding that there's a difference between a person's, you're going to be sick of, there's a difference between a person's sex, person's gender identity, or a person's gender expression, and those differences makes it important to use the correct pronouns for someone. So asking someone, what pronouns do you use, is a great way to hospitably see, name, and care for LGBTQIA people. And so it's really easy, like how we can do this. So when you start meetings, use it as how you introduce yourself. Hi, my name is Christopher Vergara, and I use the pronoun he, him, his, right? And people share those so that we all are doing that sharing. You can put it in the signatures of your email. A lot of you, I know, are already doing that, but that's, that just puts it out there and sort of takes the taboo about us saying what our personal pronouns are. Church folk, we love a good name tag. You do. Put it on name tags when you're going to do that on church, or you're going to do that on a day where it's like for new people to come visit. It's like, oh, okay, this person, this community is creating space and ready to respect me as a person. And if you make a mistake, and in all of this, if you make a mistake, apologize, right? The name of the group that provided this, ReconcilingWorks, and that's what we, especially those of us who are in the majority, cisgendered, those of us who are in the main heterosexual identities. If we make a mistake, apologize and say, and thank the person for having that confidence, taking that moment to tell you, hey, those aren't my pronouns, or hey, that's not how I identify, and then fix it and then work. I mean, it's work for everybody. Work to use the proper terms to lift up the voices and the people in the community, so that they feel that inclusion, so that you're doing the work of that inclusiveness. You're doing that work of that welcoming, and not placing it on them or the other. And this goes, for a lot of things, not only queer people, but other communities that we're trying to welcome. in our church. Intentionally welcome to all people and family matters. And specifically as Lutherans, we believe every human being reflects the divine image. Each of us is a beloved child of God, fearfully and wonderfully made, just as we are, right? Not needing to be fixed, just as we are. Our confidence in Christ Jesus calls us to work with all of God's people to transform our communities. So welcome can be a lived experience in our parish communities and in the world, right? That is sort of the goal of all of this. So I've been talking now for a while, and so I'm just going to check to see if we have any questions, and I think I see one. Let's see, do we have? Okay, so I got a question. Okay, yeah, about asexuality. I didn't dive into that. We were sort of going very beginner, but that's a good question. And I will, so asexuality, sort of the A, LGBTQIA, is a term that is used. Asexual or aromantic, for example, are terms, or they're short versus ace or arrow, are is a sexual orientation. Asexual is a sexual orientation characterized by a lack of sexual attraction toward any gender, right? And aromantic is an orientation characterized by a lack of romantic attraction toward any gender. These are two separate sort of resources. This is a sort of a separate orientation spectrum. And it's sort of like, if we've been talking a lot, and when we talk about sexual orientation, sort of on this x-axis, this asexuality spectrum is sort of like on a y-axis for all my math people, right? And so you can identify, be heterosexual, bisexual, gay, or lesbian, and then have a varying degree of sexual attraction for your what you're attracted to. And so that sort of, it's sort of a gray scale, and there's sort of like a middle. So if you put sort of asexual, where you have no attraction, to being attracted, then there's like that gray area, and we talk about that gray A, and we talk in that gray area, we talk about people being demisexual. So these are people who experience sexual attraction after a close emotional connection is formed, or demi-romantic. Oh wait, here, I think I have it in the, yep. Do you see? Here, I'm trying to hold it. So they have, so while we've talked about this spectrum, then there's a spectrum of attraction. And there's some people who might identify as heterosexual, bisexual, pansexual, but then be asexual, who have no attraction. And then there's a sort of a gray scale. But all of that is sort of explained in this book. Are there resources available for congregations? Yes, there are. There, like I said, at ReconcilingWorks.org, there are a wonderful slew of resources, including this one, to engage and to talk to, and they accompany you in learning how to be more welcoming in your parish communities as a person and as a community, which is great. The other question, how can we start these conversations in our congregations? Some of our members might be resistant to these topics. Yeah, I think you start by you just have to look at the world around you, and we say it, and most of our churches say it, right? All are welcome, or we sing it in our hymns. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. So what does that really mean? Right? When we say that, when we put that on our doors, what does that mean? And so then how are you prepared to welcome people who don't necessarily look like or are the majority of that group of the congregation? And it's not just LGBTQIA people, but immigrant communities or communities of color, or whatever it is that those differences, that stranger. And I think reminding people that that mandate is in the Bible so many times, of welcoming that stranger, that's part of the work that we have to do as church, is great, is a way. And I think another is to not do it by yourself, right? You should start talking to other people and start developing a community of people who are asking these questions, and just start engaging in the conversation. Like today, you're engaging in this conversation with me, and you'll be listening all day long. But start having the conversations, and you'll see people will start, maybe they're nervous about it at first, or they're not sure about what that means. But creating a space like this one where you say, okay, here, let's just talk about these terms so we all understand what we're saying. And sometimes you'll find people will gravitate to wanting, that curiosity will bring them in to want to engage and participate. And obviously, the Advocacy Task Force, the Office of the Bishop, is here to help in you participating in these questions. The question is, will these videos be available after the event? Yes. So we're live streaming them now. And they are, after we're done, they'll exist, and you'll be able to watch them again, share them with your congregation, and continue the conversation even after, right? Because these are going to be quick. We're gonna do sort of 45 minutes and then on to the next topic. So if you want to dig deeper with your congregations or with your communities or in your home, you will be able to reuse these videos. So this is great. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate this time that we've had together. Like I said, ReconcilingWorks.org if you want to continue the conversation. And here at the Advocacy Task Force at the Bishop's Office, we're here to continue this conversation. We're very excited to have you, and that you woke up early to do this work and engage in this conversation with us. And I hope you have a blessed and wonderful day today. So happy Pride.